Well, I had the strangest thing happen over the last couple days. Um, I'm not roofing right now. That's my usual job. My boss is in the field, and they don't exactly need me at my second job. I'm a temp at a local service master, so it's been kind of light work for them so far. And so my third job is I do some writing on the freelance writing on the side. And yesterday, unbeknownst to me, because there was a coffee cup right by behind my new laptop, which I had purchased just last month. It wasn't cheap, but somehow I knocked that over and it seeped underneath the laptop, and you know those little speaker mesh things underneath it. Somehow it seeped underneath there, and basically, despite us putting it on rice and calling around and seeing what can be done, it won't even turn on. The thing is fried. So I went out and I bought a second laptop today. It's a different model, but it's at a different price. It's about $300 cheaper. I'm still kicking myself about that. But after I got that done, I went over to the Barnes and Noble looking for Prague magazine. And Bill Bruford is slated to be on the cover of this month's magazine. He was a drummer for a few of my favorite bands, Yes, King Crimson, Genesis. But he was on the cover, and I wanted to read that story. But that wasn't there. But the previous month's cover story that was on Close to the Edge by Yes. And that's one of my favorite albums of all time. I was turned on to them in junior high school after hearing the bass line for Roundabout. An obsessive collector that I was, I made my folks get me every album that they ever had over the course of time on it. But I opened it up, and Alan White was on there. And he was at the mixing board next to like John Anderson, Steve Howe, and, Squire and Wakeman and those guys. And it talked about the transition from Bruford, who wanted out of the band, to White. And apparently it was just a real professional job that was done between them. Bruford said he wanted out, but he, was willing to stick around, but they wanted to hire White, and White, he was showing them drum parts and that sort of thing to ease the transition. And then I come home to find out that Alan White died yesterday at the age of 72 up in Seattle, where he lived. It was just announced a few days ago that he would not be participating in the Close to the Edge 50th anniversary concert tour. And then on his page, I saw on like my Facebook feeds, old pictures of him were starting to be posted with him and his family. And I thought, uh-oh, this does not look good. And it turns out that it wasn't. So White has passed on. And a real tragic loss. For those of you who don't know Alan White, you can look him up. He basically came up in the late 60s as a part of the scene there. Got a surprise phone call from John Lennon, who, this was in 69, who asked him, after seeing him in a club, to join up with the Plastic Ono Band in 1969's Toronto's Live Peace concert. It was released as Live Peace anyway. Then he continued to be Lennon's drummer after that. He was on tracks like Instant Karma. When he worked on the Paul McCartney diss track that Lennon wrote called How Do You Sleep, which George Harrison played on, he met up with George Harrison, and then apparently he played on Harrison's famous 1972 release, My Sweet Lord. It was during that time that he attracted the attention of Yes, because that was about the time they were playing, finishing up Close to the Edge, which was apparently a pretty excruciating recording for Bill Bruford, who kind of wanted to get on anyway to go to King Crimson, which Robert Fripp asked him to join. And, that was that. And kind of like the Live Peace concert with Lennon, where Alan White had to learn the songs flying over to Toronto for the gig. he only had 3 days to prepare for the Yes Show, which wound up taking place in Dallas. Somehow he pulled it off and remained in the group all the way through till, turns out, yesterday when he passed on. And, it looks like Jay Shellen, I think is his name, is going to be taking over the drums on there. But it's just, Yes was always one of my favorite bands since hearing them. It pretty much guaranteed my outlaw status at Brody Middle School, or I shouldn't say outlaw, but weirdo, because the other kids at the time were listening to Nirvana, House of Pain, Yo MTV Raps type stuff, and here I was listening to Yes, Rush, and Genesis. And I'm thinking me and my 8th grade self would have viewed this year as particularly tragic. I think it was just last month or a couple months ago where Genesis finally called it a day after a run at Wembley Stadium. Phil Collins pretty much announced that it's over. And looking at the shape Phil Collins is in nowadays is just tragic. But he soldiered on and managed to give, from what I saw from the YouTube highlights, a really great show. And then a few years ago, Neil Peart died. And Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee have only just kind of started talking about that. I watched the interview with on the Strombo show, which is very candid, but very filled with expletives too. I've never heard Geddy talk that salty before. But and then there's Yes, who has no original members left in it, unless you want to count the Yes operation with John Anderson that he's doing with Trevor Rabin and Rick Wakeman. But for all intents and purposes, the Yes that belongs to Steve Howe, which was a continuation of the Chris Squire group, there's no original members left in it. And aside from Chris Squire, Alan White has been the longest serving member in that band. And now I think Steve Howe is probably is in that place. In fact, I'm almost positive it is. So it's definitely a hard day for me, because those groups that knocked me out with 20-year-old material in 1992 are not around anymore. I expanded my listening habits since then to country music and that sort of thing. When you work with my boss, then you're going to be listening to country and you're going to be listening to gospel, which is fine. I love both of those mediums. But there's a song out by the Bellamy Brothers and John Anderson, No Country Music for Old Men. And I kind of related to that, All the good ones have died or have packed it in. And I haven't heard anything in the last 20 years that has really knocked me out, as far as rock and roll goes. I know we were talking about progressive rock, but just some really intelligent music. I know Tool, for its part, is trying to do that, and it feels like that's a band I should really like, but I just can't get into them. And as far as rock and roll, it's the same thing with the Foo Fighters. I feel like I should like them more than I do. Dave Grohl does everything I would do if I were a rock star. But I just can't get into it. And I don't know whether we're going to see the likes of a Rush or a Yes or a Genesis ever again. And that's a real tragedy. And it does show in the listening habits of young people. Because they said this during the Strombo interview. The host, his first name is George. I cannot pronounce his last name. It's one of those Greek names. It's about yay long, and I don't want to butcher it. But he said that there's so much change in the world, and for the first time that he can remember, the music had absolutely nothing to do with it. And I'll post more videos as far as the why and the whatnot that I think it's happening. Some of it is a post-Christian worldview, I think. I'm a devout Christian. I'm not any good at it, but Others, it's low common denominator corporatism, but more on that at a later time. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty heavy this morning regarding Alan White, and you know, we can just look back at his body of work, and we can say, you know what, job well done.